Good afternoon. My name is Steve Squarey, and I am Chair of the Board of Directors for Center for Community Solutions, a nonpartisan think tank focused on identifying solutions to health, social, and economic issues facing our community. One important issue that has been a focus of our attention at Community Solutions is what we can do to improve school success and high school graduation rates. While we know that improvement of grade-level reading is absolutely critical to these efforts, there is much work to be done if we are to achieve the needed improvement. The reading assessment data and statistics in the United States suggest that as many as 2/3 of fourth graders are not proficient readers. In the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, 58% of the city's third graders were rated as limited readers after last fall's reading assessment. While there are diverse opinions on how we ought to tackle this problem affecting our young readers, the importance of doing so, if we are to improve outcomes for our children, is undeniable. For decades, researchers have documented the importance of students reading at grade level when it comes to achieving educational outcomes. And educators often refer to third grade as the point in time when students transition from learning to read to reading to learn. We also know that this important milestone is a key predictor of future educational attainment and economic success. In response to this research, the third grade reading guarantee became law in Ohio in 2012. This law requires a reading diagnostic assessment of all K through third grade students by September 30th of each year. Immediate action is required for students who are not on track, including parental notification and intensive instruction. Students must achieve proficient reading scores on the Ohio Achievement Assessment by the end of third grade, or they are retained for the following term. However, advancement is still possible through summer testing and mid-year promotion, and there are some exceptions to the policy for students with disabilities and those with limited English proficiency. Given that the 2012 reading assessment policy is relatively new, much remains unknown about the benefits and challenges of the reading guarantee. As a result of the new law, many are paying closer attention to grade-level reading. However, some parents, educators, and policy analysts worry that holding children back leads to increased dropout rates, harming vulnerable students, and potentially resulting in social, emotional, and self-esteem problems. They also feel that the policy puts undue blame on students instead of failing schools, and that the reading guarantee could disproportionately impact low-income and minority schools, highlighting barriers to equitable outcomes from the third grade reading policy. Nonetheless, the third grade reading guarantee has succeeded in calling attention to the issue of illiteracy in the education system, the need for increasing reading time and instruction for children, and the needed alignment of priorities in the community. As third grade reading is an important predictor of high school graduation and future economic success, this growing focus on childhood literacy could have widespread benefits on individual and system reading levels. We all have much to learn going forward as we face this important challenge. Thus, we are so pleased today to have such a distinguished expert here to discuss this very important issue. The Honorable Barbara O'Brien is the Policy Director for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, a collaborative effort of foundations, nonprofit partners, states, and communities across the nation dedicated to ensuring that more children in low-income families succeed in school and graduate prepared for college, a career, and active citizenship. As Policy Director, Barbara works to engage policy and advocacy networks in promoting local, state, and federal policy reforms in order to strengthen, scale, and sustain improved child outcomes and school success for children in low-income families. Previously, Barbara was the first fellow of Piton Foundation and spent 16 years as president of the Colorado Children's Campaign. Notably, she also served 4 years as Colorado's 47th Lieutenant Governor, becoming only the fourth woman to hold that office in Colorado's history. A longtime advocate for young children and innovative policy initiatives, we are eager to learn from Barbara's expertise and experience. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored and pleased to introduce to you the Honorable Barbara O'Brien.
Thank you very much. I forgot that I need to update my bio because I did maybe the craziest thing I've ever done last year and ran for and was elected to the Denver Public School Board. So I am an urban school board member, and I know a lot of people said I was going backward in my career, but you know, you have to go where your passion is, right? And mine's with education. I was talking with Kathleen Sebelius, who was governor of Kansas and now in federal government. But her father, as you all probably know, was governor of Ohio for 2 terms and then ran for the Cincinnati School Board and served 2 terms there. And she told me that her father said it was the most rewarding work he ever did when he was on the Cincinnati School Board. So I figure if he could be a 2-term governor and go to a school board, I can be an LG and go to a school board. It's actually good to be back in Ohio talking with you about my favorite topic. I've been in Columbus and a couple of other communities as the Campaign for Grade Level Reading tries to not only raise awareness about how important 3rd grade reading proficiency is, but talk to communities about their role in helping address the challenge of moving more kids to proficiency. And I just want to remind you of a couple of the numbers that created the urgency behind this push for more proficiency at the end of 3rd grade. And this has to do with low-income families, which are particularly impacted by the things that help hold kids back when we want to be moving them forward. And that is that about 80% of low-income 4th graders fail to reach reading proficiency, and they are 6 times more likely to drop out of high school. So the 2 issues that I've been talking with some of your friends here in Cleveland about, both 3rd grade reading and high school graduation, this is one of those items in an arc of a student's progress where if you get it right, it can help open up lifetime opportunities. And if we fail our kids, it can close doors for most of their lives. I don't think it could be any more urgent an education issue than we have. We also know that there are economic costs to not having more kids reading well. A recent study said that the economic cost of high school dropouts costs our country $350 billion annually in lost wages, taxable income, welfare, health, and incarceration costs. So in addition to limiting human potential when young people don't learn to read, if we can flip that around, we're actually making an investment in our future economy by boosting reading. Part of the theory of change for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading is that we all know our schools need to do better and they need to do more. But our theory of change is that schools cannot do it by themselves. There are so many social and economic forces that determine how ready kids are before they get to school and the kind of supports they have when they're in school and they're struggling. It's just clear to us that there has to be a very tangible, concrete way that cities and communities can do their part that makes it easier for the schools to do their part in moving kids forward. So what we have focused on is that if communities can work on 3 key things in the life of a young child, it will do as much to boost their reading proficiency as the work the schools are already doing. So 3 leverage points are summer learning, and I'll talk about that probably a little bit less than the other ones, just because there's more of a focus here on the next one. chronic absenteeism among kids, which is a real crisis in a lot of urban districts, and then the number of kids who are just not ready for school when they enter kindergarten. So summer learning, just quickly. There's about 100 years of research that kids during the summer, and this is all students, lose an average of more than 2 months in reading achievement and math. And I think a lot of middle-income families have made up with this, with enriched summer camps and tutoring if their kids had trouble in school the year before, all sorts of ways you can buy a solution to this summer learning loss if you have the money in your wallet to be able to do it. But what it means is that over every summer, lower-income kids fall further and further behind their middle-class peers. And it's estimated that they are between 2.5 to 3 years behind in 5th grade just because of what they lose during the summer. This is an easy one for funders and policymakers to do to help schools, to be able to fund enriched summer opportunities that are not the old style of just drilling skills into kids who were a little bit behind, but opening up all sorts of enrichment activities so their understanding of the world, their belief that they belong in a larger world, and their vocabularies all grow through the summer. So a combination of core academic learning, hands-on activities, arts, sports, technology, and meaningful relationships with adults through the summer can do a lot to help kids not lose during the summer, but actually move ahead. Indianapolis has a highly successful program called Summer Advantage, where kids gain almost 3 full months of learning over the course of a summer because of the enriched programs that they're in. School readiness, one of the other leverage points. Just as there's a school achievement gap for kids, there's a readiness for school gap for kids that separates disadvantaged children from their middle-class peers. Researchers say that as early as a child is 18 months old from a low-income family, you can identify their gaps in development around vocabulary and other skills that are tied to school readiness. We also know that parents and pediatricians and preschool programs and all sorts of community services can play a role in helping kids become school ready, but it has to be intentional. And I don't know about Cleveland, but I know in most urban communities across the country, maybe only half of 4-year-olds who are from disadvantaged families are actually receiving high-quality preschool. It's even better if they can receive preschool when they're both 3 and 4. You can close so many gaps with 2 years of preschool, but it's been a challenge, especially in the down economy that we've been through, to fund the kind of high-quality preschool slots that can get kids caught up. Spark, Ohio, has a wonderful national reputation for having a parent training, literacy stimulation, play-based approach to children's school readiness. And they've now had a longitudinal study that shows that not only are those children better prepared for kindergarten, but those gains have now lasted all the way through 5th grade. So I think that's a great model for getting kids ready for school. There's a Garden City, New York program called Parent-Child Home Program. Again, play-based, because that's how young children learn. Parent training, but they link it with a guaranteed spot in a preschool program. And those children come from families that have an average of $10,000 annually for family income. And this program has shown that children who have the program and then a year of preschool are 10 months developmentally above their chronological age. So the reason I point this out is that sometimes when it comes to education, for all of us, not just Cleveland, it seems really daunting and really challenging to find ways to make a difference, and yet we're seeing them all over the country. What we're not seeing is programs that have the funding and the volunteerism and the analysis to go to any kind of scale that reaches all children. And I think that's the main reason I wanted to come to Cleveland today, because cities like Denver and Cleveland and Columbus have an opportunity to dream large enough with the kind of funding partners and the community partners and school district to try and do something on enough of a scale that you could move the needle and fill people with confidence that we can actually solve some problems and that we can change the life trajectory of a lot of kids who right now are being left behind. So the part of this plan from the Campaign for Grade Level Reading that I want to spend a little more time on is the issue of chronic absence. And there's all sorts of reasons why some kids miss more than 10% of school days a year. And it can be because they have asthma and they're homesick. It might be transportation. It's sometimes, more often than you would think, what they call maternal depression, depressed moms who have enough trouble getting it together anyway that if it's not against the law for your child to stay home, it seems easier. It doesn't seem quite as important in kindergarten as it might be in first grade. This is an area where having a determined mayor to make sure that city services are aligned with what community groups learn about why kids are missing so much school, and having funders who are helping fund real deep dives into the attendance data so you can identify and reach out to kids who are really struggling with school attendance. It is just prime for the kind of partnerships that can make a difference, that can then have kids in school more often so they can receive the teaching that they need so much. And tracking chronic absenteeism is as much a number crunching thing as anything. It's getting, so I'm going to say this because I'm married to one, but you get a couple of nerdy people and you have them study patterns and trends, and you try and predict if there are some factors that you can identify, and you find out if it is transportation or if it is asthma or something else. And you try and solve the barrier to each child's lack of attendance one by one, because it's going to be different for most kids. And you work with the schools to make sure that you are welcoming when those children start attending more often. And then you work with the school district to make sure that they have the ability to get the kinds of specialized tutors they need to help get kids caught up, or the great enriched summer programs you can send them to so they don't lose learning over this summer. So I do think that attendance and addressing chronic absenteeism is just rich with opportunity to make a measurable difference in trying to improve third grade reading. I also know that it's not always easy to have some of these partnerships. You've got people with very full plates. You have busy mayors. You have, I think, even busier school superintendents. And so having people who will step up and bird dog some of these issues and cajole others into doing their part, it takes a lot of people to coordinate all of this. It doesn't happen just by chance. So taking some of these on means you commit to a long-term effort. You make sure you've got the leadership that you need, and you make sure that people who have real resources to bring to the table, whether it's the district or the city, that everybody's aligned and working forward. And I think you have a lot of that here in Cleveland. I've been talking with Bob and a number of people who have been visiting Cleveland, and you have so much of what we're looking for here that I can't wait to see what you do with the opportunity that you have ahead of you, and clearly the need, as we all know from the statistics on third grade reading. I also want to touch on the political environment for this, and I'm glad you mentioned the third grade reading guarantee for Ohio. About 2/3 of the states in the United States now have third grade retention bills on the books, and they have varying degrees of required diagnosis and intervention and varying degrees of funding to pay for new services. But I think if we're going to turn lemons into lemonade, then we have to figure out how to take this opportunity. And the opportunity is, it's really an urgent issue. If it weren't urgent, we wouldn't have state governments mandating that children be retained if they're not reading. I think the impulse is absolutely the right one. And I think the challenge and the opportunity to communities is to say, you know, if we think at the highest levels of state government that this is an urgent problem and there should be some accountability for it, how do we help keep the accountability from falling just on the shoulders of the little ones? And I think we do it by putting strategies in place that give them every chance in the world to be successful. We help them get a good start in life before they even walk through the doors of a kindergarten. We make sure that they have the chance to have someone help them catch up in their language skills. Middle-income kids, by the time they go to kindergarten, know about 22 letters. Low-income kids know 9. I mean, the fact is there's a huge gap, and there are things we can do to help close it. So part of it is taking this as an opportunity. And I think part of it is, and I take this on myself now as a school board member, I don't think there's any excuse for a school not knowing at second grade or at first grade if a child isn't on track. I mean, how can it be that it's a surprise at the end of third grade that a child isn't reading well? So I think we have to take it on ourselves to say we ought to know as soon as children walk through the doors to school where they are in reading. And in Colorado, our law calls for an individualized plan for every student, that the parents have to be not only notified of the fact that their child isn't on track to be proficient, but they have to be given suggestions for what they can do to help their child catch up. And then there's money to train more specialized reading tutors. We don't have enough to reach all the kids. And our United Way has stepped up with new donations from the biggest employers in the Denver area to pay for the training of volunteer tutors to go into the schools. So we are trying to mobilize every group of committed people we can find to help address this. And I think the legislation was the thing that woke up many people that they have to find to get involved. It also created a new coalition for us. The retaining third graders bill was initiated by our business community. And the children's community, the child advocates, kind of hijacked it and started asking questions about, well, you're just going to let them fail? What are you going to do for them early on? And out of that came a wonderful coalition that has held together to today, that's working together on making sure United Way stepped up to the plate, and that our legislature is making it easier for reading tutors to be certified, and all sorts of things that can come from policy and practice. So I welcome this legislation. I just know that it's up to us, real people, to turn it into something that actually works rather than just being on the books and a couple of kids get punished. So having been around the country talking with communities about the importance of third grade reading, I've learned a couple of lessons. And Bob from the Literacy Coalition asked me to share what I've learned. And one of them is, and this is maybe the most important one, that you do have to have a lead organization that is trusted and respected, and that it's staffed at a level that allows it to coordinate and foster collaboration among the partners. And I know the Literacy Coalition fits almost all of that. I don't know if you're staffed at the level, but I'm making a pitch for you. Having come from the nonprofit world, I'm making your fundraising pitch that you have to take staffing seriously. It's not enough just to have one person running around trying to talk to 50 partners who want to do well. You have to have the ability to solve problems, get people talking together, make sure people are doing their piece of the puzzle, but it all feeds into a strategic plan. You have to have a school district as a true partner. And by true partner, I mean true. And it is hard for school districts. I know this. Teachers don't like other people in their classrooms. It gets them messed up. They can't find the materials that they need. And yet tutors need some place to do their tutoring. There's all sorts of concerns around confidentiality in students that a district has to worry about. And yet community partners need data to be able to have a data-driven strategic plan and to monitor their impact. So these are complicated. But if you don't have the school district as a real and true partner, it's going to be very hard to have ability to target and ability to track impact in a way that makes coalition members feel as if they're actually making progress and making a difference. You need to have a mayor who's willing to make it a priority to align city services with the needs of kids who are struggling. I don't think that's as challenging as the school district's role, but it's important to make it a priority when so much is happening in every city. I want to give you an example of a really good partnership in Kansas City, Missouri, between a community coalition and 4 elementary schools. Turn the page, Kansas City decided to start its 3rd grade reading project on a small scale, try and learn some lessons, and then get bigger. So it started working with 4 low-performing elementary schools and worked with the school district to identify the children in those elementary schools who were at risk for not being proficient by the end of 3rd grade, and then to identify the barriers to those children learning to read. So they identified 467 second graders who are probably not going to be reading proficiently if something really fundamental doesn't happen in the lives of those children. They know who they are, they know their attendance records, they know what children do in the summer. They have some sense of how the families are doing just because volunteers have talked to them about what's going on in the school. And they have a plan for this summer through next year to see if they can get 467 second graders to 3rd grade reading proficiency through a summer program and tutoring with absenteeism or attendance data tracking whether or not they're spending more time in school. So we'll know a year from now if they were able to make that fundamental change in the lives of those little second graders. And if they can, they will expand to more grades. And if they don't hit their goal, they're going to reassess their strategies and figure out what partners are missing and come at it again. I just love it that they know exactly the number of kids they have to reach to get classes in 4 different schools up to proficiency in a year. That's a meaningful challenge. Some of the obstacles I've seen around the country is that it's really hard to keep momentum going. You know, it's easy to get excited by a new idea, but after the new idea of more 3rd graders reading comes and people understand how important it is, you go into the slog of implementation. I mean, it is hard to implement. So I'm going to throw my own city, Denver, under the bus because I wouldn't want to dare criticize the implementation of any other community. But here's what we have. Our mayor is completely on board and has a commission whose sole purpose is to look at aligning city services with boosting 3rd grade reading. Our United Way raised new money from Denver employers and is spending it on proven parent training and specialized tutoring. our governor and lieutenant governor, and you have the daughter of the current lieutenant governor here in Cleveland working in a law firm. All over the state talking how important in this. Our legislature passed the Colorado READ Act. Our Denver superintendent has made increasing third grade reading proficiency to 80% of all third graders part of the district's new strategic plan. And yet, so we have all of this great stuff going on. I talked to one of our best volunteer tutoring programs called Reading Partners. They've been evaluated and have great results. They say that most Denver principals won't return their phone calls when they want to be able to sign up tutors to go into tutor, won't return their phone calls. Reading Partners, wonderful program, hasn't taken the time to find out what other volunteer programs are in their same elementary schools. So there's another great program called Summer Scholars. Reading Partners and Summer Scholars. Reading Partners is the school year. Summer Scholars is the summer. They have not talked about who's working with what kids. How can they make sure they hand off the kids from the school year to the summer program and not lose any time having to do diagnosis and assessment all over again? And how do they make sure they're identifying, they should have the same kids in both programs. That's a test of how well they're identifying the kids who are behind. They don't even know if they have the same kids in each other's programs. And I only mention this because it is really hard work. Everyone's plates are full. Everyone's busy. You're doing the best that you can. And someone needs to come along and say, you better call Cindy at Summer Scholars and look at your lists of participants and make sure they're the same, or find out why you're identifying kids differently. Maybe talk to the principal about what kids need your help the most. You need staff at a coalition who can bird dog the implementation so that it's going deeply into the community programs and deeply into the schools to make sure that the kids are getting the most benefit out of what you have to offer. I think implementation is the biggest challenge that faces us, and figuring out how to have stewardship and to be in for the long haul is the great challenge for all of us, because we've seen things come and go. That's how we will do the best for the kids who are counting on us. It's not going to happen by magic. But I'm going to return to something that I said earlier in my talk. If we do this, and if we do it well, and if we're adults, we stick with it, and we're mature about our relationships with each other as we work on these problems, we're going to be doing it because we know our kids need us, and we're going to all benefit because more children will read, more will succeed in school, more will graduate, our communities will be more vibrant, and our country will be stronger. So thank you for having me here today. I love the work that you're doing, and you have to work harder. Thank you.
A challenge indeed. Hello, I'm Dan Malthrop. I'm the Chief Executive here at the City Club of Cleveland. And today at the City Club, we are enjoying a Friday Forum with Dr. Barbara O'Brien, National Policy Director for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. We will return to Barbara in a moment for our traditional City Club question and answer period, and we encourage you all to formulate your questions now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point and, in fact, questions. We welcome all of you here and those of you joining us through our primary media partner, 90.3 WCPN, 104.9 WCLV, and WVIZ PBS IdeaStream, or on one of the many other radio stations across the country that carry City Club programs. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. Next Friday, June 13th, the City Club is pleased to welcome Susan Taylor, CEO of the National Cares Mentoring Movement and Editor-in-Chief Emeritus of Essence Magazine. For more information on that program and any of our upcoming or past programs, please visit us online at cityclub.org. Today's program is the annual W.T. McCullough Lecture Series presented in partnership with the Center for Community Solutions. We thank you very much for your generous support in making today's program possible. We also welcome today guests at tables hosted by the Center for Community Solutions, the Centers for Families and Children, the Literacy Cooperative, Northeastern Ohio Education Association, and PNC. We thank you all for your generous support. Additionally, we welcome students at today's program. Student participation is made possible by a generous gift from the Jeffrey David Epstein Memorial Fund. Joining us today are students from Shaw High School. Would you please stand to be recognized? Excellent readers, all of you, I'm sure. Now we would like to return to Dr. Barbara O'Brien for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding microphones today are Marketing and Outreach Specialist Kirsten Pianka and City Club intern Spencer Kiesel. There he is. Our first question, please.
Dr. O'Brien, how do you wean young children off electronic devices? It seems to me that it's very simple for a child to be plunked in front of a television set or play video games or do things on the smartphone. Is this an obstacle to learning of reading, and what can we do about it?
You know, I think it has to be an obstacle, and I'm a voracious reader, and it breaks my heart that kids aren't reading as much as they used to. I think there was a survey recently that came out that kids on their own are now only reading one book a year, and it used to be 10 or something like that. If I had a solution to that, I would package it and I would make $1 million, because parents are so hungry for how they wean kids. So I think part of it is going to be just information for parents, because they can't use the TV or screens as a babysitter. But the reality is that once kids get older, screens are just ubiquitous in their lives, and I think teaching them the inner control to know when to use them as a tool or for fun, but when to balance them with other things. I think we have to be real about how much they'll be a part of their lives when they're older, but at least starting out in the early years, the parent information and the parent training about what your other options are besides putting a game in their hands or turning on the TV will be important. But I don't have a better solution than that. I think it's a really tough one and an important challenge.
Hi, Dr. O'Brien. My name is Pat Snee, and I teach in Mentor, Ohio, but I taught in Cleveland for 15 years, language arts. My question is, and by the way, I think as a teacher in Ohio who's active, I think that you have to work harder is one of the mantras we've been hearing a lot, but we're willing to work harder. Specifically,
I think there was a we in there. We all have to work harder.
Specifically, one of the programs that I know is out there is that the state of Oklahoma engaged in universal pre-K. And I wondered if there's any data on that to show that the gap closing did in fact sustain through the third grade. And if so, doesn't it make sense to worry on the state of Ohio level, both in urban and rural impoverished areas where our most at-risk students are? Why not run with the pre-K first and do the assessment and follow-up later before you impose the third grade reading guarantee, which will have some stigmatizing effects on students and potential implications on dropouts?
So I'm going to be hesitant to talk about Oklahoma because I know in the beginning when they first started their universal pre-K program, it was really high quality. But I know that during the economic downturn, a lot of states made deep cuts, increased class sizes, reduced teacher qualifications. So I don't know where they are right now, but I can speak to Denver, where again, the business community led an effort to raise the sales tax to fund universal preschool in Denver on a sliding scale. And we now have kids who have been through that long enough that they're in third going into fourth grade, and they are reading above the district average. Their attendance is very good. Their parents got in the habit of getting their kids to school every day, and we are feeling that there might even be some benefit to their math scores. There's a researcher who's taking a look at whether or not you can correlate because preschools tend to be so focused on literacy, but it looks as if their math scores are going to be better as well. So we're feeling in Denver really good about the Denver preschool program because we know the sales tax kept the quality up, and it's reaching, I think it's virtually reaching every 4-year-old in Denver. And now we're looking for ways to get some more high-risk 3-year-olds in. So the other question was about sequencing of activities. I think we have to do both and. You know, we can't just, we have to focus on both the early years, what happens between birth and going to kindergarten, and then kindergarten to 3rd. And I just don't think we can do one without working on the others all at the same time. One of the reasons we've seen a washout of Head Start gains in school is that very often kids who have been in Head Start end up going to very, very low-performing elementary schools. And that if you can make sure that especially children who are struggling have 2 years in a row of a really good teacher, and I'm seeing a nodding head here, if you can get 2 years in a row with a really good teacher, those gains are cemented and they stick. But it's not enough to think that 9 months of a program followed by 2 years of a bad elementary school is going to be good for kids at all. So I think we've got to look at the whole continuum from around birth and parenting to 8 years of age, 3rd grade, and be working on all the pieces of it along the way.
Good afternoon, Dr. O'Brien. I'm Marcia Mockabee, President of the Urban League of Greater Cleveland, and thank you for coming and raising this issue with us today. One of the things that is intriguing me, and I'd like to get some advice from you about, is that the school year is, of course, the time and the place where the school districts have major responsibility for working on the literacy component. However, out-of-school time providers own the best opportunities for summer. What advice can you give us about leveraging the resource of out-of-school time providers who already often have relationship with families and children to be able to help them to become that key system that can be connected to the school year that helps with summer learning loss?
So we found that most of our summer providers received some United Way funding in our community. So United Way was a key place to start having standards for summer programs they would fund. So they became very clear about evidence-based standards for a good program. They started finding ways to provide training and support for the programs they had been funding but didn't meet those quality standards, and tried to get everyone up to the same level. Now that didn't reach all the providers, but it reached a good number of the summer programs, and it got them thinking that their job was not just keeping kids safe in the summer, giving them something to do, but they really were part of a child's education and made literacy a required part of their program to receive United Way funding, but literacy from an enrichment lens. So trips to the museum and, you know, just the kinds of things, field trips out to the creek that runs through Denver to look at bugs, the kind of things that kids, they build their vocabulary, they learn how the world works, they see a different part of the community. So I think our United Way was really right on with enrichment and learning tied together in the summer programs that they required.
Good afternoon. My name is Watika Holly. I'm a sophomore at Shaw High School. And my question is, what do you think will help high school students and middle school students enhance their reading skills so that they won't fall behind and or keep advancing in their reading skills?
Oh, that's a really good question. There's been a philosophy in the United States that if kids are behind, you go back to where their level is. So you could be a 14-year-old but maybe reading at the level of an 11-year-old. So you would be given reading materials for 11-year-olds. There's been, over the past several years, a lot of research that if you give kids books that are actually too hard for them, but they're about subjects that they're really curious about, you can get them to want to push themselves forward too. So instead of teaching down, we're trying to accelerate forward. And, you know, who's more curious than a teenager? So you give kids a chance to learn about something they really care about and stumble over vocabulary words they haven't seen before, they're going to figure it out. So I think we've actually learned a lot about the importance of motivation in learning and giving kids the educational challenge they need to reach inside and push themselves, so it's not just pushed on them. Does that sound right to you?
Dr. O'Brien, I appreciated your analysis, in particular analysis of how hard it is to achieve these kinds of interventions. I believe that in Ohio this has happened, but my experience is a little closer to North Carolina right now, where my son has been in education for 16 years and just went into the state legislature. The legislature there passed a third grade reading guarantee, I believe last year, or the year last year, I think. At the same time, they cut per pupil allocations to students to school districts. They also cut the program which provided means-tested pre-K to low-income families and aren't funding 100% of what's needed. So there seems to be a disconnect between providing a guarantee or a standard and the resources to do it. And local districts there, I know, and are saying, all these intervention strategies like summer camp or tutoring, we don't have the resources to do them, and we're still going to have to test kids right away to see if they move forward or not. We don't feel this is fair to us. And at least there, they don't even have the resources of local levies like we do in Ohio. So is this typical of the response of legislators to this kind of thing?
I think that's more typical than I would like or that you would think. And I think what we have to fight against as much as we can is not letting assessment of reading and diagnosis of early reading problems and standards for proficiency get caught up with the pushback against all testing and the debates that are going over around Common Core standards, because I think the vocabulary is very much the same. And some state legislators are starting to think that testing reading or standards for reading proficiency are somehow part of the Common Core. So I've been on some conference calls where legislatures trying to roll back what they did. They weren't funding it very well from the beginning, but what they're doing is creating a public perception that it's somehow tied up in the Common Core and testing, which a lot of parents don't want anyway. So I think we are in danger of losing the momentum toward taking this seriously and using data to really know where kids are and analyzing what they need as the debates around Common Core and testing get louder. So I've been following North Carolina. I think that's the most extreme that I've seen, but there are a lot of states right on the verge of having that same kind of debate. And when it's so underfunded, I'm not sure it'd make that much difference anyway, but when they keep the requirements in and they cut funding and then they start debating any testing so you can't even know how kids are doing, then I think you have a really bad problem in a state.
My name is Amy Butcher, and I'm currently a teacher in Westlake City Schools. And my question is, there are myriad pieces of research that have found that retention is detrimental to student psyche and also graduation rates. So I would like to know if there's any research you found that finds that retaining students in third grade until they reach the reading guarantee is beneficial.
So I think what we've seen from Florida and New York are modest. But it's an indication that if you have retention, but it's wrapped around more tutoring more early diagnosis, more small group study, that you can actually move kids forward. So I think retention by itself, which most of the past research was on, is clearly not good for kids. But we don't have very much on retention when it's part of a package of services. So my feeling is, at least in Colorado, we could never have gotten early diagnosis, kindergarten readiness assessment, small group size tutoring, specialized tutoring, summer reading academies. We never could have gotten those if we had just said, this is good for children. But when we said it's not enough to just retain kids, what are you doing when they're 2 years younger? We got, for our state, $21 new million just for those activities, and we're less than half the size of Ohio. Like, that's a lot of money in Colorado. So I think you're right. That's what the body of research has said for the past, but we don't have much research on what happens when you have a comprehensive package, and that's what I'm hoping will make a difference, because we couldn't have gotten those special services any other way.
Dr. O'Brien, in recent years, there's been a trend throughout the country in allocating funds for education to allocate more and more funds to charter schools, which means there are less funds going to public schools. And my question is, how do you feel about that trend? And secondly, to what extent do you feel there's a significant difference in the reading skills generally of boys and girls who come out of charter schools as compared to public schools?
So I have to do truth in advertising right now. I actually wrote the 1992 Charter Act for Colorado. So I have believed that charters had the chance to teach us some things about public education that traditional districts, at least back in the 1990s, weren't doing. And I also will push back on you. It might be different in Ohio because some states have a lot of for-profit charters. I don't know if you do. In Colorado, we don't have a single for-profit charter, not one. They are all, they have to be authorized by the school district. They receive public funding. They can't charge tuition. So what we are finding is that there are some charter schools in Denver with 75% free and reduced lunch students that are the top performing middle and high school schools in the entire state. So we now have 20 years of experience and some schools that are showing the way in school culture, length of the school day, length of the school year, professional development for teachers that didn't come out of districts. They came out of charter schools that had the flexibility to try different ways of doing things, and year after year they're getting results. Now, I also know there's some really bad charter schools around, and I think school boards ought to close them down as soon as the test data come out and they're poor performing. I think that's one thing school boards have not done well, is to hold them to higher levels of accountability than traditional schools, because the whole idea was they had to show us new ways to educate, and if they can't do it, I think close them down. But they're all public school students. They're all our students. And I personally don't think we ought to distinguish that the kids are different because they're in one type of school or another. We just ought to have really serious ways of evaluating their effectiveness and be kind of ruthless about what gets the right to educate kids and what schools don't.
The parent-teacher organization meeting in a suburban district, middle income or higher income, will pack the gym. The same can't be said for lower income districts, whether urban or rural for that matter. Can you cite some examples of successful parental engagement programs around the country and what it is that makes them successful?
Yeah. So regarding parent involvement, I think it's absolutely essential, but I don't think we can let schools off the hook. Their job is to educate kids. And if they don't have parents who have the ability to be engaged, maybe they're working a couple of jobs, maybe they're dealing with depression, but I don't think this kids should get any less of an education based on whether or not their parents were able to be engaged. So knowing that it's important, I don't think that's an excuse for schools. But there are some really good examples. There's something called Abriendo Puertas. It's opening doors in Los Angeles that has parent engagement fairs. And I think the last one they had last September, they had 100,000 parents attending. I mean, it was written in Spanish, it was culturally appropriate, it was on a weekend, and parents turned out. We also have a principal in Denver, and I know he didn't think this up, he learned it from someone else, but he started having the older students deliver their parent-teacher conference. So the student was in charge of presenting the grades and their work. And he got his parent engagement, and this was in a very blue-collar, low-income community, maybe about 30 miles outside of Denver. He had 95% parent participation when he moved the meetings to later in the evening, allowed time to get home from work, and had the students start talking for weeks before the parent-teacher conference about how they were planning their presentation, and parents turned out. So I think there are plenty of strategies around, but I don't think we let schools off the hook for educating children no matter what.
Today at the Cleveland City Club, we have been listening to a Friday forum with Dr. Barbara O'Brien, National Policy Director for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you, Dr. O'Brien. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.